The WNBA is about to shoot themselves in the foot courtesy of those women leading the charge for the Women's National Basketball Players Association fighting for a new CBA deal.
The WNBA has been chasing growth for decades, and just when it seemed like the league had finally turned a corner with stars like Caitlin Clark pulling in record-breaking attention, a brand new report has dropped that threatens to unravel it. All insiders are now saying that a full lockout isn't just possible, it's very likely. That means the 2026 season, which was supposed to be the biggest in league history with expansion teams and unprecedented fan momentum, could be in serious jeopardy.
From what I am hearing, it seems like everything is pointing to a player strike, basically a lockout for next season.
Imagine the league riding its highest wave of popularity, only to pull the plug on the very season that could define its future. For fans, players, and owners alike, the stakes could not be higher. This isn't just about labor negotiations. It's about whether the WNBA can hold on to the spotlight or collapse back into obscurity. And the clock is ticking faster than anyone expected.
The WNBA, the personnel involved in the negotiations for the WNBA, the WNBA PA, they are destined to wreck any momentum this league has built over the last 2 years.
The October 31st deadline might sound like just another date on the calendar, but for the WNBA, it's the line in the sand that could determine whether the league takes its next step forward or collapses under its own weight. This is the day when the current collective bargaining agreement, the document that governs everything from salaries to roster sizes to revenue splits, is set to expire. Normally, deadlines like this create urgency, bringing both sides to the table with determination to hammer out a deal. But according to recent reports, urgency is the very thing that's missing from this round of negotiations.
The rumblings around the industry is that brands are gearing up for the WNBA to at least have a stalled season next year, because the meetings that these players had, the 2 meetings that they had over All-Star, neither of them went well. And it seems like the players are on this side and Kathy Engelbert and everyone else is on this side. Things did not go well during those All-Star meetings, and that is a big reason why they wore the shirts that they did that said, "Pay us what you owe us." Now, again, I don't know what is exactly going on in these meetings. I don't think the media, I don't think fans should know. But from all of the little rumors and whispers that I'm hearing, everything is pointing to a player strike happening.
The league and the players' union remain miles apart, and insiders warn that the gap is so wide it's hard to see how they bridge it. In time, what makes this so alarming is that, unlike in past years, there doesn't appear to be a fallback plan ready to go. In 2019, for example, both sides agreed to extend the deadline by 60 days, buying themselves enough time to eventually hammer out a deal before free agency opened. But this time, with expansion looming, the stakes are higher, the window is smaller, and the tone is far more hostile. The union has accused league owners of dragging their feet, treating the talks as if they were running out the clock instead of negotiating in good faith. Owners, on the other hand, argue that the demands coming from players are unrealistic, with revenue sharing at the center of the conflict. This back and forth has created an atmosphere where neither side seems willing to budge. The result is a negotiation that feels less like a compromise waiting to happen and more like a showdown barreling toward disaster, and the consequences are staggering.
You gotta walk before you can run. And if they failed to reach a new deal for the 2026 season, well, the WNBA is going to crawl back into obscurity.
If October 31st comes and goes without a deal, or at least an extension, the league could face an immediate work stoppage. That means no training camps, no free agency, no expansion draft planning, and potentially no season in 2026 for a league that has finally started building a new fan base thanks to stars like Caitlin Clark. This kind of disruption isn't just inconvenient, it's catastrophic. It's important to remember how fragile this momentum really is. For years, the WNBA struggled to pull itself into mainstream sports conversations. And just as it's breaking through, a lockout threatens to undo all of that progress. Fans don't schedule their loyalty. If the product disappears for a season, they'll simply move on. And once they're gone, history shows it's nearly impossible to bring them back. The deadline is more than just paperwork. It's a ticking clock that could strip away the league's biggest opportunity in decades. If there's no deal, there may be no season. And if there's no season, the WNBA risks falling right back into the shadows it fought so hard to escape. But the deadline is only the beginning. The deeper question is what this means for Caitlin Clark and the unprecedented momentum she's brought into the league. That's where the real panic begins.
This is the height of the WNBA, probably since the 1990s. And I so much worry about a lockout or a player strike happening because I don't want to see this momentum and this wave that the WNBA players in the league are on. I don't want to see that halted by something like a strike or something like a lockout.
Caitlin Clark is more than just a rookie phenom. She's the lifeline of the WNBA's current surge in popularity. The player whose name alone sells tickets, drives ratings, and keeps casual fans glued to their screens. Over the past few years, her influence has been undeniable. From her dazzling junior season at Iowa that shattered viewership records, to her unforgettable senior year where every game felt like a national event, Clark has done something no other player in the league has managed. She's made the WNBA a consistent talking point in mainstream sports media. When she arrived in Indiana, the Fever instantly went from a forgotten team to must-watch television. Every headline, every broadcast, every sponsorship push tied back to Caitlin Clark. And now, with whispers of a lockout looming, the league risks throwing away everything she's built. Think about the sweat equity she's put in. Even during her college days, Clark wasn't just playing basketball, she was changing the culture around women's sports. She turned Iowa into a national brand, boosted television networks with record-breaking numbers, and drew fans who had never once tuned in to a women's basketball game before. That momentum didn't vanish when she entered the WNBA. If anything, it accelerated. Indiana Fever games, which once drew middling attendance, suddenly became hot tickets. People who couldn't care less about the standings wanted to see the main attraction. Sponsorships poured in, jerseys flew off the shelves, and broadcasts that once struggled to find an audience were pulling in millions of viewers. But here's the problem. Fan loyalty isn't to the league, it's to Clark. And that's where the lockout threat becomes so dangerous. If there's number 2026 season, fans who only recently discovered women's basketball might drift away. They'll find other sports, other stars, other distractions. The buzz that Clark has single-handedly generated will cool off, and when the WNBA eventually comes back, it won't be returning to the same landscape. It'll be clawing its way uphill again, trying to convince fans to care a second time. History suggests most won't. The danger is even bigger when you consider Clark's career timeline. Athletes don't get infinite prime years. Every season matters, especially when you're at the peak of your influence. Losing one of Clark's early professional years isn't just a missed opportunity for the league. It's a potential fracture in her momentum. Instead of riding a wave of back-to-back seasons that build her into a generational figure, the WNBA risks forcing her into a holding pattern. Imagine the absurdity, the most important player in league history sitting at home. Not because of injury, but because of boardroom politics. And this isn't just about Clark's legacy, it's about the WNBA's survival. Without her, attendance is already dipping. Without her, casual fans don't care. A lockout could cement the idea that the WNBA is unreliable, unstable, and incapable of sustaining the excitement its biggest star has created. The truth is simple. Caitlin Clark saved the WNBA from irrelevance. But if the league allows a lockout to erase her momentum, the very star who lifted them up could become the reason fans finally walk away for good. And as damaging as that would be, the problem doesn't stop with Clark. The next crisis looms. In the league's ambitious expansion plans that could collide head-on with the lockout, for years, one of the loudest criticisms of the WNBA has been its limited number of franchises. Fans in major cities without teams have begged for expansion, while the league itself has promoted the idea that adding new markets would help boost visibility, revenue, and overall stability. Finally, after years of dragging its feet, the WNBA made what seemed like a bold move. 2 new expansion franchises were announced. Toronto and Portland are set to join in 2026, while the Golden State Valkyries are already preparing for their debut. On paper, this should be a turning point for the league, a chance to plant roots in basketball-rich markets and capitalize on the surge of interest driven by stars like Caitlin Clark. But the timing couldn't be worse, because without a new collective bargaining agreement in place, expansion is a dream heading straight toward a nightmare. Here's why. Every expansion draft, every roster rule, and every financial detail tied to new teams must be outlined within the framework of the CBA. Without that agreement, nothing can move forward. The Golden State Valkyries were smoothly slotted into the league because the rules were already clear. But Toronto and Portland, their arrival is frozen in limbo until owners and players agree on new terms. If negotiations stall and a lockout occurs, these expansion plans won't just be delayed, they'll be paralyzed. This creates an impossible contradiction. The league has loudly marketed expansion as proof of its growth, showcasing it as evidence that women's basketball is finally breaking barriers. But if a lockout pushes the start of the 2026 season back, or worse, cancels it entirely, those announcements will ring hollow. Fans in Toronto and Portland who were promised professional women's basketball may be forced to wait, souring their initial excitement. Sponsors and investors who signed up for shiny new markets may start questioning whether they've backed the right product. Instead of being a triumphant leap forward, expansion could end up exposing the league's instability to the very people it was trying to impress. It's also worth remembering that expansion is expensive. Owners are banking on increased ticket sales, merchandise, and broadcasting opportunities to make these new teams profitable. But those projections rely on uninterrupted play and consistent fan engagement. A lockout slams the brakes on both. Without games, there's no hype. Without hype, there's no revenue. And without revenue, expansion stops looking like growth and starts looking like a financial disaster. Even worse, expansion is supposed to spread the star power of the league. Toronto and Portland were expected to introduce new faces to fans, diversify storylines, and build rivalries. But if the lockout wipes out Caitlin Clark's momentum, what good are new franchises when the league's biggest draw is sitting at home? Instead of amplifying excitement, the league risks splitting an already fragile audience across more teams during a period of decline. The irony is brutal. Expansion was meant to symbolize progress. Instead, it could magnify collapse unless owners and players find common ground soon. The very move that was supposed to save the league could help bury it, and if expansion is tied up in red tape, there's another fight looming that's even more explosive: the battle over revenue sharing. The issue that has both sides digging in their heels like never before. At the heart of the looming lockout lies one issue that neither side is willing to budge on: revenue sharing. The players, led by the Women's National Basketball Players Association, argue that they deserve a fairer slice of the pie. They're pushing for a 50-50th split of the league's basketball-related income, a model that mirrors what the NBA players enjoy. On paper, it sounds reasonable. After all, if players are the product, shouldn't they share equally in the profits they generate? But here's the catch: the WNBA doesn't control all of its revenue streams. By the time sponsorships, media rights, and cross-league agreements filter down, the WNBA reportedly only gets around 42% of total revenue to itself. And from that 42%, the players are demanding half to the owners. That demand isn't just ambitious, it's impossible. They argue that the financial foundation of the league simply can't sustain such a split. Unlike the NBA, which enjoys billions in television contracts and global merchandising, the WNBA is still fighting for mainstream acceptance. Owners insist that agreeing to the players' terms would jeopardize the league's financial stability, forcing franchises already operating on thin margins to collapse. From their perspective, it's not greed driving their reluctance, it's survival. But the players see it differently. They point to the surge of attention the league has received over the past 2 years, driven almost entirely by stars like Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, and A'ja Wilson. They see ticket sales climbing, merchandise flying off the shelves, and television ratings hitting all-time highs. To them, this isn't the time for owners to cry poor. It's the time to invest in the very players responsible for the league's revival. Their argument is simple. If the WNBA truly wants to grow, then players need the financial security and support that allows them to dedicate themselves fully to the game, not juggle second jobs overseas. This clash over revenue sharing has become a battle of philosophy as much as finances. Owners view the league as a fragile business that must be protected carefully, while players see it as an undervalued product being artificially capped by conservative leadership. That disconnect has led to bitter confrontations at the negotiating table. Reports from the first in-person meetings paint a picture of frustration, with players leaving sessions describing them as a waste of time. The situation is escalating, publicly as well. During All-Star Weekend, players warmed up in shirts that read, "Pay us what you owe us." The symbolism was clear. They want fans to know where they stand. But public displays like these, while powerful, also carry risk. Owners may interpret them as hostility rather than negotiation, deepening the divide. Meanwhile, fans watching from the sidelines are left wondering if the fight is about fairness or simply about money, revenue. Sharing isn't just a financial detail. It's the flashpoint that could push the WNBA over the edge. Both sides are digging in, and neither appears ready to compromise. And while the battle over dollars and cents rages, the league is forgetting one crucial element: the fans, whose patience is already wearing thin. Because if the players and owners don't wake up soon, the real price won't just be lost revenue. It will be lost trust. And the first cracks are already showing. When negotiations stall behind closed doors, one of the oldest tactics in labor disputes is to take the fight public. That's exactly what WNBA players did during All-Star Weekend when they warmed up in bold black and white shirts stamped with the words, "Pay us what you owe us." It was a statement aimed not just at the league and its owners, but at the fans, the sponsors, and the media watching from the sidelines. For players, it was about more than revenue sharing. It was about respect. They wanted to show that they weren't simply employees waiting for scraps, but professional athletes demanding to be treated with the same seriousness as their male counterparts. The symbolism worked. Cameras flashed, social media buzzed, and sports outlets picked up the story. For a few days, the narrative shifted from game highlights to the player's message. The union succeeded in putting pressure on owners by framing the negotiations as a fight for fairness and dignity. Fans who only casually followed the WNBA suddenly found themselves debating whether the players were right to demand a bigger cut. The shirts did what they were designed to do: spark conversation. But there's a flip side to this kind of public confrontation. Owners aren't blind to optics, and many were reportedly irritated at seeing their athletes use the league's biggest weekend as a stage to criticize them. Instead of moving talks forward, it risked making owners even more entrenched, less willing to negotiate in good faith. Some saw it as grandstanding rather than problem-solving, and in a league as financially fragile as the WNBA, pushing too hard too fast can backfire. There's also the question of how fans interpret the message. For hardcore supporters, the protests reinforced their loyalty to the players. But for casual fans, the very group the league desperately needs to convert into long-term followers. The spectacle may have come across as drama overshadowing the product on the court. A league already criticized for struggling to capture mainstream attention risks, feeding into the perception that off-court battles are louder than the actual basketball still. The players' frustration is easy to understand. Leaders like Breena Stewart and Nafisa Collier described recent meetings with the league as a waste of time, highlighting just how far apart the two sides remain. To them, the shirts weren't just theater. They were a cry for urgency. The clock is ticking toward October 31st, and every day without progress makes the threat of a lockout more real. Public protest, in their eyes, was the only way to make the stakes clear. The question now is whether this strategy builds momentum or deepens division. Will fans rally behind the players and push owners toward compromise? Or will the league grow, tired of being painted as the villain, and dig in even harder? What's certain is that the fight has spilled out of the boardroom and into the public square. And while the slogans and shirts make headlines, the most dangerous problem may be the one no one can fix with a catchy phrase: the slow but steady erosion of the fan base. Because, as attendance numbers show, not even Caitlin Clark can carry the league alone forever. For years, the WNBA has struggled with one glaring problem: keeping fans engaged consistently. Even now, during what should be its golden era with stars like Caitlin Clark, Angel Reese, and Aja Wilson driving headlines, the numbers tell a troubling story. When Clark plays, arenas fill, broadcasts spike, and merchandise sells out. But take her out of the equation, and the interest falls off a cliff. Reports already show that Indiana Fever games without Clark on the court draw noticeably smaller crowds, with some dipping below 15,000, a steep drop from the 17 or 18,000 that have become the new normal. That pattern reveals a harsh truth. Much of the league's momentum rests on a single star. And if a lockout wipes away a full season, the fragile fan base that's just now forming could shatter completely. Sports history proves how devastating a work stoppage can be. The 1994 MLB strike left baseball reeling for years, with attendance and television numbers plummeting long after play resumed. The 2012 NHL lockout nearly bankrupted smaller market teams, and it took a decade for the league to rebuild its credibility. Even the mighty NBA felt the sting of its 2011 lockout, which left fans bitter and sponsors cautious. These were leagues with long histories, billions in revenue, and global fan bases. If a lockout could shake them, what chance does the WNBA have? The challenge is even greater because the WNBA's audience is still in its infancy. Many of the fans tuning in today are first-timers, pulled in by the Caitlin Clark phenomenon or the rising wave of women's sports visibility. These casual viewers don't have decades of loyalty to fall back on. They aren't emotionally tied to franchises in the way diehard NBA or NFL fans are. If the games disappear for a season, so will their attention. Habits change fast. A year without the WNBA could send them right back to focusing on men's basketball, women's college basketball, or even entirely different sports. Gone, the odds of winning them back shrank dramatically. This isn't just speculation. The warning signs are already here. Attendance outside of Clark-driven games has plateaued. National broadcasts without her consistently draw lower ratings. Social media engagement spikes when her name is involved, but dips when it isn't. In other words, the league's new fans aren't loyal to the WNBA brand, they're loyal to one player. That's not a sustainable model, and a lockout would only magnify the problem. The irony is that the players and owners both claim to be fighting for the future of the league, but in the process, they may be destroying the very fan base that future depends on. Each side is so focused on winning the negotiation that they're ignoring the reality that fans don't wait around forever. And in a world where entertainment options are endless, disappearing for even a single season could mean disappearing for good, the real nightmare. If the WNBA leaves that opening, rival ventures like Unrivaled or other investor-backed leagues could swoop in, stealing the audience the WNBA worked so hard to build. That's when the panic becomes existential. Every league that faces a lockout worries about money, sponsors, and television contracts. But for the WNBA, the threat is far more severe. A full lockout in 2026 isn't just about losing a season, it's about the very survival of the league. Unlike the NBA or NFL, which have decades of history and billions of dollars in reserve, the WNBA is still balancing on a razor's edge. Its recent growth, driven by Caitlin Clark and a handful of new stars, is real but fragile. If that momentum is shattered by an entire lost year, the consequences could spiral into what many analysts call a doomsday scenario. Picture this: expansion teams in Toronto and Portland left hanging, their debuts canceled before they even tip off. Sponsors who eagerly invested in the league's rise pulled their money, unwilling to wait around for an unstable product. Networks that finally agreed to broadcast games in prime slots quietly shift resources elsewhere, filling their programming with safer, more reliable content. And fans, the lifeblood of any sport, drift away, their fleeting interest redirected to something else. By the time the WNBA returns in 2027, the audience that once seemed within reach may have vanished. This isn't a far-fetched idea. History shows that smaller leagues rarely survive full work stoppages. Momentum doesn't freeze when play stops, it disappears. And the WNBA doesn't have the luxury of starting over. A lost 2026 season would erase the hard-earned progress of the past 3 years, forcing the league back to the same dark corners it occupied in 2015, when arenas were half empty and national relevance was non-existent. The bigger danger is the competition waiting in the wings. Private investors and sports entrepreneurs are already exploring alternatives, with projects like Unrivaled showing interest in becoming more than just an off-season showcase. If the WNBA stumbles, what's to stop a rival league from stepping in and positioning itself as the real future of women's basketball? All it takes is one deep-pocketed backer, one media contract, and one group of disgruntled stars to turn a side project into a legitimate competitor. If that happens, the WNBA may not just lose a season, it may lose its monopoly on professional women's basketball in America. Even the league's identity is at risk. Without continuity, without games, the WNBA brand could weaken so much that fans start to see it as replaceable. Imagine if by 2027 the conversation shifts from when does the WNBA return to do we even need the WNBA anymore? That's the nightmare. That's the scenario insiders whisper about but rarely say aloud. The truth is brutal. A full lockout could set the WNBA back an entire decade. And for a league that only recently started to climb out of obscurity, a 10-year setback isn't just a stumble, it's a death sentence. But even if the WNBA somehow survives the financial blow, the human cost of this standoff could be just as devastating, because the players, the very women driving this rise, stand to lose the most if the lights go out. When the dust settles from this escalating battle between WNBA players and owners, one question remains unavoidable. Who actually loses the most? On the surface, the league itself seems to be in jeopardy. A lockout would slash revenue, derail expansion, and potentially cripple the brand for years. Owners would lose money, yes, but they have other businesses, investments, and NBA partnerships to cushion the blow. Many of them can afford to wait. The players, however, do not have that luxury. For WNBA athletes, a full lockout means losing an entire year of income, and for some, that could be crying. Unlike their NBA counterparts, WNBA salaries aren't life-changing sums. Most players rely on overseas contracts to supplement their income, and the financial strain of missing a domestic season could force many into difficult decisions about whether to keep playing at all. Younger players, trying to establish themselves, could find their careers cut short, while veterans nearing retirement may never return. The very people the union claims to protect could end up suffering the most. Then there's Caitlin Clark. For her, the stakes are even higher. She isn't just another player. She's the face of the league, the one fans pay to see, the name sponsors are banking on. Every season she loses is a season of her prime that can't be replaced. Unlike owners, Clark doesn't have decades to make her mark. Her influence is tied to what she does on the court right now. If she's sidelined because of negotiations she has no control over, it's not just her legacy at risk, it's the entire foundation of the WNBA's growth. Fans tuning in for Clark might never return if they're forced to wait until 2027 to see her play again. And what about the fans? They are caught in the middle of a fight they never asked for. Casual viewers who are just starting to warm up to the league may feel betrayed, left to wonder why they should invest their time and loyalty in a sport that can vanish for an entire season. Die-hard fans, the ones who have supported the WNBA through its leanest years, could become disillusioned to frustrated by a league that seems to sabotage itself just as things are getting good. Once trust is broken, rebuilding it is nearly impossible. Sponsors and broadcasters are also key players in this equation. They've poured money into the league under the belief that women's basketball is finally becoming commercially viable. If a lockout wipes out their investment, many will walk away. Corporate loyalty doesn't survive uncertainty, and those deals won't come back easily. When you step back, the truth is undeniable. Everyone loses in a lockout, but some lose far more than others. Owners will recover, but players may not. Stars like Caitlin Clark could have their primes wasted, and fans could drift away for good. The league claims to be fighting for its future, yet in the process, it may be sacrificing the very people who give it life, and that leads to the chilling final question: if no one truly wins, is the WNBA writing its own obituary before it even reaches its peak? The WNBA stands at a crossroads unlike any it has faced before. On one side is unprecedented growth, fueled by Caitlin Clark's superstardom, rising attendance, and long-awaited expansion. On the other side is the looming shadow of a full lockout. That could erase years of progress in one devastating blow. Players demand fairness, owners insist on financial caution, and fans are left wondering if the league they've just begun to embrace will even exist in 2026. History shows that work stoppages leave scars, and for a league still building its foundation, the scars could prove fatal. Everyone claims to be fighting for the future, yet in the process, they may destroy the very momentum that future depends on. The WNBA has never had more attention, but it has also never been closer to collapse. The question now is simple: will it rise, or will it waste its moment forever?